The village is a little hilltop, we still call it the Riddle House. The Riddle family had lived there. It stood on a hill overlooking the village. Some of its windows boarded, tiles missing from its roof, and ivy spreading unchecked over its face. Once a fine-looking manor, and easily the largest and grandest building for miles around, the Riddle House was now damp, derelict, and unoccupied. The little Hangletons all agreed the old house was creepy. Half a century ago, something strange and horrible had happened. There's something that the older inhabitants of the village still like picked over so many times and had embroidered in so many places that nobody was quite sure the truth was anymore. Every version of the tale, however, started in the same place 50 years ago, before at daybreak on the fine summer morning when the Riddle House had still been well kept and impressive, as a maid had entered the drawing room to find all three riddles dead. The maid ran screaming down the hill into the village, roast as many people as she could, lying there with their eyes wide open, cold as ice, still in their dinner things. The police were summoned, and the whole of Little Hangleton had seized with shock, curiosity, and all ill-disguised excitement. Nobody wasted their breath pretending to feel very sad about the riddles, for they had been most unpopular. Elderly Mr. and Mrs. Riddle had been rich, snobbish, and rude, and their grown-up son Tom had been, if anything worse. All the villagers cared about was the identity of the murderer, for plainly 3 apparently healthy people did not all drop dead of their natural causes on the same night. The hangman of the village pub did a roaring trade that night. The whole village seemed to have turned out to discuss the murders. They were rewarded for leaving their firesides when the riddles arrived dramatically in their midst and announced to the Silent Hood that the man called Frank Bryce had just been arrested. Frank cried to several people. Never. Frank Bryce was the riddle's gardener. He lived alone in a run-down cottage on the grounds of the Riddle House. Frank had come back from the war with a very stiff leg and a great dislike of crowds and loud noises, and had been working for the riddles ever since. There was a rush to buy the cook's drinks, and hear more. Always thought he was odd, she told the eagerly listening villagers. After her 4th sherry, unfriendly, like I'm sure if I offered him a couple months, I've offered it 100 times. Never wanted to mix, he didn't. Ah, now, said a woman at the bar. He had a hard war, Frank. He was like the quiet life. There's no reason to. Who else had a key to the back door than Bart, the cook? There's been a spare key hanging in the garden cottage far back as I can remember. Nobody found the door last night. No broken windows. All Frank had to do was creep up to the big house while he was asleep all sleeping. The villagers exchanged dark looks. I always thought he had a nasty look about him. Right enough, a grunted man at the bar. Ward turned him funny, if you ask me, said the landlord. Told you I wouldn't like to get on the wrong side of drink, didn't I? Dot, said an excited woman in the corner. Horrible temper, said Dot, nodding furtively. I remembered when we was a kid. By the following morning, hardly anyone in Little Hangletongue doubted that drink Ricewood had killed the Riddles. But over in the neighboring town of Great Hangleton, in the dark and dingy police station, Frank was stubbornly repeating again and again that he was innocent, and that the only person he had seen near the Riddle's house on the day of the Riddle's deaths had been a teenager boy, a stranger, dark-haired, and pale. Nobody else in the village had seen any such boy, and the police were quite sure that Frank had invented him. Then, just when things were looking very serious for Frank, the reporter on the Riddle's bodies came back and changed everything. The police had never read an odder report. A team of doctors had examined the bodies and concluded none of the Riddles had been poisoned, stabbed, shot, strangled, suffocated, or as far as they could tell, harmed at all. In fact, the reporter continued in a tone of unmistakable bewilderment. The Riddles all appeared dead. The doctors did note as through determined to find something wrong with the bodies, and that each of the Riddles had a look of terror upon his or her face. But as frustrated as the police said, whoever heard of 3 people being threatened to death, as there was no proof that the Riddles had been murdered at all, the police were focused to let Frank go. The Riddles were buried in the Little Hangleton churchyard, and their graves remained objects of curiosity for a while. To everyone's surprise and amid a cloud of those suspicious, Frank Bruce returned to his cottage on the grounds of the Riddle's house. So, as far as I'm concerned, he killed them, and I don't care what the police said Dot and the hangman, and if he had any propensity to leave here, knowing as how we know he did it, but Frank did not leave. He stayed to tend the garden for the next family who lived in the Riddle house. Then the next for neither family stayed long. Perhaps it was partly because of Frank that the new owner said there was a nasty feeling about the place, which in the absence of inhabitants started to fall into despair. The wealthy man who owned the Riddle house these days neither lived there nor put it to any use, said the villagers, and they kept it for tax reasons. Nobody was very clear what these might be. The wealthy owner continued to pay Frank to do the gardening. However, Frank was nearing his 77th birthday now, very deaf, his bad leg stiffer than ever, but could have been pottering around the flower beds in the fine weather, even though the weeds were staring to creep up on him, try as he might to suppress them. Weeds were not the only things Frank had to contend with. Boys from the village made a habit of throwing stones through the windows of the Riddle house. They rode their bicycles twice, and they broke into the old house. And for a day, they knew that old Frank devotion to the house and grounds amounted almost to an obsession, and it amused them to see him limping across the garden, brandishing his stick and yellow croaky at them. Frank, for his part, believed the boys tormented him because they, like their parents and grandparents, thought of him as a murderer. So when Frank awoke one night in August and saw something very odd at the old house, he merely assumed that the boys had gone one step further in attempts to punish him. It was Frank's bad leg that woke him up. It was paining him worse than ever. In his old age, he got up and limped downstairs into the kitchen with an idea of refilling in his hot water bottle to ease the pain, the stiffness in his knee. Standing at the sink, filling the curdle, he looked up at the Riddle house and saw lights glimmering in its upper windows. Frank knew at once what was going on. The boys had broken into the house again, and judging by the flickering quality of the lights, they had started a fire. Frank had no telephone, and in case he had deeply mistrusted the police ever since they had taken him in for questioning about the Riddle's deaths. He put down the kettle at once and hurried back upstairs as fast as his bad leg would allow. It was soon back in the kitchen, fully dressed and removing a rusty old key from its hook by the door. He picked up his walking stick, which was propped against the wall, and saw into the night. The front door of the Riddle's house bore no sign